قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, ويحدث في الأجسام والجواهر كالألوان والأكوان. And property is something that occurs in bodies and in atoms, like colors and the four states of being: motion, stillness, connection, and disconnection. SharH, the explanation: أن العرض كالبياض والسواد وما بينهما من الألوان, is that the property, like whiteness and blackness and any colors in between, لا يتحيز بذاته, it's not self-contained. It doesn't fill its own space, this property. It is in a place, this color or this motion or this stillness, this temperature or this texture, etc. It is in a place, but not by itself. It's not self-contained. أي لا يشغل فراغا بمفرده, meaning it doesn't fill its own space. وأما الأكوان فهي جمع كون. Now concerning the akwan, that's the plural of kaun. The word kaun in Arabic means being. That's a noun. Existence. Kaun. Being with the meaning of existence. Not an adjective. Rather, a gerund. It's in Arabic what's called a source. We're going to call source noun. A source noun. Gerund. I'm going to call it source noun though, because it's the source for derivatives. Being. So this kaun, its plural is akwan. وهو الاجتماع والافتراق والحركة والسكون. And it specifically refers to meeting, that means contact, and separation, that's disconnection, and motion and stillness. فالأكوان من الأعراض لأنها لا تتحيز بذاتها. And so these four states of being, they are properties because they are not self-contained. بل تحيزها يتبع غيرها. Rather, their containment is by extension of something else. قال بعضهم, some said, أصول الألوان, the fundamental colors are البياض والسواد والحمرة والخضرة والصفرة وما عدا ذلك بالتركيب. The fundamental colors are white, black, red, green, and yellow. And whatever is other than those is by composition. So I would love to have some elaboration here. Because if you mix what? Yellow with blue, you'll get green. If you mix yellow with blue, you'll get green. And you could do that if you have some crayons. If you were a little kid coloring the color book and you paid attention to your colors, then you knew that. So I'm not sure how that goes. That's one thing. Another thing is, some of these words might have meanings other than what appears to me in their most classical sense. Because the sky above us is described with khudra. Khudra. Khudra appears to mean green, but this sky above us is blue. Yeah, and you'd say zurqa, blueness or blue. So Allah knows best. This is what the Shaykh says here. I don't have any elaboration. Also, maybe some of them say that black is not a fundamental color and that black is the merger of all the colors. And they would say, you can try it yourself. Take all your colors. If you have paint, put them all together. You're going to get black. So that's what some of them said. And I heard some kuffar saying nothing has a color. By that time, I knew about how philosophy goes. Yeah, I had learned, mashallah, yani, some good information religiously. So I wouldn't be surprised, yani, don't be surprised if you heard some kuffar saying that. That's all philosophy. That's how you can identify philosophy. Philosophy defies what's observed or confirms what's not observed. قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him. وَالطُّعُومِ وَالرَّوَائِحِ, and flavors and odors. الشرح, the explanation. أن الطعوم عرض من الأعراض. The explanation is that flavor is a property amongst other properties. وكذلك الروائح, and likewise odors. فأما الطعوم فأنواعها 9. Now concerning flavors, it has 9 kinds. Let me pull my book out here. Excuse me. Okay. It has 9 kinds. Wahi, they are al-marara, bitterness. Mor means bitter. So I think that's the flavor of coffee, bitter, of course, without any sugar or cream. Wal harafa, and pungent or acrid. Harafa, I think that's the flavor of vinegar. Wal muluha, and saltiness. Wal rufusa, rufusa. Ah, we'll come back to that. Wal humuda, and sourness. That's different from bitterness. Sourness, yani, like the flavor of a lemon, I think. Because then you also have al-qabd, al-qabd as a flavor. I'm not sure. Yani, qabd, the only meaning I know for qabd is a fist or a grip. So I'm I'm so confident that humuda is sourness. Al-qabd, though, I'm not sure. Well, halawa, and sweetness. What dusuma, and I think that's greasy or fatty flavor. Some greasy flavor or fatty flavor. What tafaha, and blandness or flatness. That's a translation I found. وهي أي التفاهة عبارة عن طعم بين الحلاوة والدسومة. And this, what I translated as flatness, refers to flavor between being sweet and greasy, assuming my translations are good. فهي منحصرة في هذه الأقسام 9. They, يعني the flavors, are limited to these 9 types بطريق التتبع, by way of research, tracking them. So this may, يعني, this is very interesting to me here. Because I know there are people who are professional tasters. Yani, somebody might hear what I just said. Let's say you understood all those words perfectly fine, better than me. Someone might say, that's all the flavors. I disagree. There's more. I tasted them myself. So this person might not be a taster, though. So that really has, yani, a professional opinion here. And they talk about the portions of the tongue. Which parts of the tongue will detect these different flavors more than others? So there's definitely talk there, knowledge there. Just want to look up some of these words real quick, see if we can get some. Bismillah. So marara, that's go here. That's bitterness. That's coffee. Harafa, we have here. I have acrid or pungent. So I think that's like vinegar. Wal maluha, salty. Wal ufusa, let's see. Ufusa. Well, that says acridity and bitterness. Okay, well, what's then haratha? Pungency, hotness, sharpness, tardiness. See, all these words here, maybe somebody really has knowledge about flavors knows how to zero in here. Even for myself, someone had to check me about the difference between bitter and sour, between bitter and sour. So maybe someone doesn't know the difference between those. So Allah knows best. Here's what they have for harafa, acridity, pungency, hotness, and these other words here. Spicy. So maybe, yeah, that makes sense. Harafa, that makes sense to me. Spicy, stingy. Yeah, maybe it's that one. Spicy. So marara, bitterness. Harafa, spiciness. Muluha, saltiness. Ufusa, pungency or pungence. Humuda, sourness. Qabl. So Allah knows best then. What's that? And what else we have here? So marara, bitterness. Harafa, spiciness. Maluha, saltiness. Ufusa, pungent. Humuda, sour. Qabl, not sure. Halawa, sweetness. Dusuma, I think that's greasy. Let me see. Dusuma, greasiness, fattiness. Akada, fatty, greasy. Okay. Also, another thing that's interesting here, because I would think greasy is a texture. So it's being counted here, according to the translation, as a flavor. And then, they say that flavor is highly connected to smell. Tasting and smelling, they say, are linked. And what else do we have here? Tafaha. Tafaha. Yeah. Tasteless. Bland. It's bland. Plain. Maybe just like sometimes you say, yeah, it tastes like nothing. Doesn't really taste like anything. Allahu alam, though. You said I looked up 9 categories of flavors in English to see if anything existed about that. I found an article that lists the following: sweet, bitterness, sour, salty, umami, starchy, carbohydrates, metallically, spicy, and fatty as 9. Then lists a few others and some additional taste not traditionally counted. Interesting. And some of those words I don't know. We'll have to look into those. Thank you. Barakallahu feek. He says, وَأَمَّا الرَّوَائِحِ, and concerning odors. فأنواعها متعددة. It has numerous types. وليست لها أسماء مخصوصة. And they don't have, those smells don't have particular names. Interesting. Curious though, how this, what's the elaboration for this? Like, if you deal with perfumes, they have like smells that are like woody. They smell like some type of wood theme smell or earth type smells, sweet smells, things like that. Allahu a'lam. قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, والمحدث للعالم هو الله تعالى, and the one who made the world occur is Allah, exalted is He. Muhdith, the event maker. The event maker of the world. The event maker of the world is Allah, exalted is He. الشرح, the explanation. Allah Ta'ala huwa dhatul wajibul wujudi. Allah, exalted is He, He is the necessarily existent self, or the necessarily existent being. Alladhi wujuduhu bidhatih. He it is whose existence is by itself. وَلَا يَحْتَاجُ إِلَى شَيْءٍ أَصْلًا, and he does not require anything fundamentally. لأنه لو كان جائز الوجود غير واجب الوجود, because had he been possibly existent, not necessarily existent, لكان من جملة العالم, then he would have been part of the world himself. فلا يصلح محدثا للعالم, and then he would not be suitable or qualified to be the event maker of the world. والدليل العقلي على حدوث العالم, and the intellectual argument for the world's createdness, the world's eventuality, أنه لو كان قديما أزليا للزم وجود أشياء داخلة في الوجود لا نهاية لها, is that had the world been eternal and beginningless, then this would dictate things entering into existence, but without having a beginning. وَهَذَا بَاطِلٌ عَقْلًا, and this is invalid intellectually. This is false intellectually. لأنه يلزم منه التسلسل, because this would lead to necessarily a beginningless chain. وهو توقف وجود شيء على شيء قبله, which is the dependence of a thing's existence upon something before it. متوقف على شيء قبله, upon something before it that's depending upon something before it. إلى غير نهاية, without an end, meaning without a beginning, without a limit. When we say here without an end, means without an end into the past. So it means without a beginning. وهذا محال, and this is impossible. أو الدور, or if it doesn't lead to a beginningless chain, it will lead to a beginningless circle. وهو توقف وجود الشيء على ما يتوقف وجوده عليه. That is for the dependence of a thing's existence upon. وهو توقف وجود الشيء. It is a thing's existence depending upon على ما يتوقف وجوده عليه, depending upon that which depends on it itself. A thing's existence depending on something else that depends on that first thing, but it's not really the first thing. There's a beginningless circle here. Neither is first and neither is second, but each depends on the other. So that's a beginningless circle. بواسطة أو بغير واسطة, whether there's an intermediary or not. Yani, it doesn't matter how many are in this circle if the last one depends on the first one, and the first one depends on the last one. وهذا أيضا محال, and this is also impossible. كإحالة التسلسل, just as impossible as a beginningless chain. قال العلامة محمد بن أحمد ميارة المالكي, said the savant Muhammad ibn Ahmad Mayyara the Maliki في كتابه الدر الثمين, in his book The Precious Gem, والمورد المعين. I'm not sure how to translate that part of the title. في شرح أبيات منظومة ابن عاشر, he said in explaining lines of Ibn Ashir's poem. Ibn Ashir's very nice poem. In from what I saw of it, I didn't study it strongly, but I read over it, and I read over Mayara's a summary of Mayara's explanation. It is almost like obligatory knowledge, but a little bit more. If someone learns this poem, he'll learn the obligatory knowledge and maybe a little bit more in Maliki school. So, what are these lines? وجوده له دليل قاطع حاجة كل محدث للصانع. His existence, it has definitive evidence, the need of every occurrence to a maker or of a maker. The need of every occurrence of a maker. Yani, every occurrence is need of a maker. لو حدثت بنفسها الأكوان لاجتمع التساوي والرجحان وذا محال وحدوث العالم من حدث الأعراض مع تلازم. Had the states of being happened by themselves, then there would be equality between, then there would be a meeting of equality and preponderance. Then there would be a meeting, there would be simultaneity between equality of two sides and preponderance of one of them over the other. وَذَا مُحَالٌ, and that's impossible. وَحُدُوثُ الْعَالَمِ, and the occurrence of the world or the createdness of the world, min hadathi al-a'rad, it's proven by the createdness of the properties, ma'talazumi, with the fact that these properties are bound to the volumes through which they exist. So let's look at those lines again before we read the explanation. وجوده له دليل قاطع, his existence, God's existence, it has definitive evidence. حاجة كل محدث للصانع, every event's need of a maker, because if it has a beginning, can't make itself exist, can't make itself start. So it needs a starter, a maker. لو حدثت بنفسها الأكوان, had the states of being, motion and stillness and connection and separation happened by themselves, or if that's linguistic meaning of ekwan, not specialized religious meaning, then had the created beings happened by themselves, or had existences of created things happened by themselves, لاجتمع التساوي والرجحان, then something would be, two things would be the same weight while one of them is heavier at the same time. That's what he's saying. Then two sides would be the same weight while one of them is heavier. Then one thing would be heavier than the other when they weigh the same. وَذَا مُحَالٌ, and that's impossible. وَحُدُوثُ الْعَالَمِ, and the createdness of the world. وَحُدُوثُ الْعَالَمِ, and the createdness of the world. مِنْ حَدَثِ الْأَعْرَاضِ, is from, yani is known by, the createdness of the properties. مَعْ تَلَازُمِ, with those created properties being bound, with being bound, yani bound to the volume through which it exists. ما نصه, quote. So here's the explanation of Mayara. وافتقار كل حادث إلى محدث, منهم من قال إنه أمر ضروري. Every event being in need of an event maker. Some said about this, about every event needing an event maker. Some said about it, it's necessary. إنه أمر ضروري. يعني it's granted mentally. يعني ضروري, it's like saying everyone says so, no one can deny it. Yani, if someone did deny it, it's like he's denying 1 + 1 = 2. لا يفتقر إلى دليل, doesn't even need proof. That's how fundamental it is. That's what some of them said. حتى قال الإمام الفخر في المعالم. Even Imam al-Fakhr said in Al-Ma'alim, إن العلم بذلك مركوز في فطرة طباع الصبيان. The knowledge of such a thing, the knowledge of an event needing an event maker, is embedded in the nature of the children. فإنك إذا لطمت وجه الصبي من حيث لا يراك. For indeed, if you smack the child's face such that he didn't see you, in such a way that he didn't see you, وقلت إنه حصلت هذه اللطمة من غير فاعل البتة, and then you said to him, this smack happened without anyone to do it at all. لا يصدقك, he won't believe you. بل في فطرة البهائم, in fact, it's in the nature of the animals. فإن الحمار إذا أحس بصوت الخشبة فزع. Indeed, had a donkey detected the sound of wood, it becomes alert. لأنه تقرر في فطرته أن حصول صوت الخشبة بدون الخشبة محال, because it is settled in this donkey's nature that for the sound of wood to happen without any wood is impossible. وعلى كونه ضروريا لو اكتفى الناظم بالبيت الأول لكفى. So according to this being ضروري, being necessary mentally, so fundamental to the human mind, yani, he's basically saying it's intuitive. Knowing that every event needs an event maker is intuitive at all, altogether. That means most fundamental, immediate function of the mind. According to saying that it's intuitive, that it's necessary, that is, then the author, Ibn Ashir, could have just said only the first line. وجوده له دليل قاطع حاجة كل محدث للصانع. His existence, it has definitive evidence. The need, yani, every event's need of a maker. Then he could have said this much and then not gone further. This next lines is more argumentation for his point. But if this is something necessary, intuitive, in fact, then he doesn't need to make more arguments because it doesn't need any, which is what he said here. لا يفتقر إلى دليل. What he said here. لا يفتقر إلى دليل, doesn't need any evidence if it's ضروري. So then he could have just said the first line and settled with that. لكفى, would have been sufficient. ومنهم من قال إن العلم بذلك نظري. And some of them said, no, the knowledge about this, the knowledge of this, which is that every event needs an event maker. They said, no, in fact, it's not intuitive. It is pondered. وهو الصحيح. And this is correct. This is the accurate saying. إلا أنه يحصل بنظر قريب. But this knowledge would occur by simple reflection. Yani, not complicated or complex process to arrive at it. وَلِأَجْلِ قُرْبِهِ ظَنَّ بَعْضُهُمْ أَنَّ ذَلِكَ الْعِلْمَ ضَرُورِيٌّ. And because of its closeness, yani, because of its simplicity, because this concept is so easily grasped, some of them thought that it's intuitive. They saw this ease as intuition altogether. And what about our Shaykh? Our Shaykh says, for some, it is necessary. It's like Shaykh saying, there's third saying. And what's being presented to us here is two sayings. One saying that it's necessary, it's intuitive, that every event needs an event maker. One saying is that it's pondered, but it's so elementary and and easy to grasp that some thought that it's intuitive, but it's not actually. And what about Shaykh? He has a third saying, which is that for some of the slaves of Allah, it is intuitive. Okay, so وإلى بيان النظر أشار الناظم بقوله لو حدثت إلى قوله وذا محال. And to the clarity of the argument, the formula here, يعني. So he says, I'll translate it literally first. وإلى بيان النظر, and at the clarification of the looking, at the clarification of the looking, أشار الناظم, the poet pointed. So the poet pointed at, or pointed to, signaled to the clarification of the looking. So the looking here, that's the formula. Yani, looking at the formula, investigating the premises that lead to the conclusion. So he's saying, now the author, though, he didn't go by that. It's like the author, the poet Ibn Ashir, he didn't take the saying that it's intuitive, because he kept going. If we say it's intuitive, he only needed to say the first line and stop there. He said that first line, but then he kept going. That means he built on it. So he has formulated an argument. So what is that argument? That's what he signaled to. That's what the poet Ibn Ashir, rahimahullah, signaled to, pointed at. Biqawlihi, when he said, لو حدثت, had it happened, until he said, وَذَا muhal, and that's impossible. Meaning, here, from here till here. He's saying this, the author signaled to the argument. He from here, لو حدثت بنفسها الأكوان, had the created things happened by themselves, لاجتمع التساوي والرجحان, then two things that then something then two things that have the same weight, one of them would be heavier than the other. وذا محال, and that's impossible. This is the formula. ومعنى ذلك أن الحادث إذا حدث في الوقت المعين. What this means is that an event, when it happened at some particular time, فالعقل لا يمنع استمرار عدمه ولا يمنع صحة تقدمه على الوقت الذي وجد فيه. The mind alone does not deem impossible that this thing that happened at some moment in time could have remained non-existent. Nor does the mind alone deem impossible that this thing could have come into existence at an earlier time than the time in which it actually did. بأوقات أو تأخره عنه بساعات. Nor does the mind deem impossible that this thing could have come into existence at a later time than the time in which it came into existence. فاختصاصه بالوجود بدلا عن العدم المجوز عليه. And so, it's being existent in particular, instead of the non-existence that's possible for it. وبكونه في ذلك الوقت لا قبله ولا بعده. And it's existing at that time, not before nor after. يفتقر قطعا إلى محدث يخصصه بما ذكر. Then it is definitely requiring an event maker that specifies it, particularizes it with what was mentioned. بدلا عن مقابله, instead of another possibility, instead of a contrary possibility. Yani, instead of an opposite possibility. ولو حدث بنفسه لاجتمع التساوي والرجحان. And had it happened by itself, then equality and heaviness on one side, equality between two things, and heaviness of one of them would be the same. واجتماعهما محال. And for those to be the same is impossible. لأنهما متنافيان, because they are contrary. They are mutually exclusive. They cancel each other out. Being equal and being unequal, they cancel each other out. وبيانه أن العالم يصح وجوده ويصح عدمه على السواء. What clarifies this is to say that the world, it's valid that it exists, and it's valid that it doesn't exist equally. So this existence and this non-existence, that's the equality on two sides. Two things that weigh the same. It's valid that it exists, and it's valid that it doesn't exist. Those two weigh the same. Kama marra, like what just passed. Meaning, didn't we just say, if a thing came into existence at some moment in time, then the mind alone doesn't say that this thing, then it's impossible that it could have existed before that or after that, or that it could have just never came into existence at all. No, the mind deems any of that possible. It could have never come into being, or it could have come into being earlier, or it could have come into being later. So then this means existence and non-existence weigh the same here for this thing. فَلَوْ حَدَثَ بِنَفْسِهِ وَلَمْ يَفْتَقِرْ إِلَى مُحْدِثٍ. So then if a thing happened by itself and didn't require an event maker, لزم أن يكون وجوده الذي فرض مساواته لعدمه مرجحا عليه بلا سبب على عدمه الذي فرض أيضا مساواته لوجوده وهو محال. Then, so had it happened by itself without requiring an event maker, then that would dictate that its existence, which has already been supposed to be equal to its non-existence, is preponderant over its non-existence without any reason. So that means then it got heavier. One side got heavier than the other while they are equal. We already established that those two sides are equal. So how did one get heavier while they're equal? How could it get heavier without a reason? Because if there's no reason, it means they're equal. But they're not equal because one's heavier. بلا سبب على عدمه الذي فرض أيضا مساواته لوجوده. Because its non-existence was also deemed equal to its existence, this event. Its existence and its non-existence have the same weight. وهو محال. And this is impossible, that these two that have the same weight, one would outweigh the other. فتعين أن يكون المرجح لوجوده على عدمه ولكون وجوده في الوقت دون وقت آخر غيره. So then, by process of elimination, there's no option but that the preponderator of this event's existence over its non-existence, and for this thing's existence to be at one time instead of another time, dictates, there's no option but that this preponderator is someone other than the event itself. Is other than the event itself. Now here, we have a footnote here. He says, bila sabab, without a reason. Its existence, which has the same weight as its non-existence, would become heavier without a reason. That's what he said. And Shaykh doesn't approve of this wording because it's saying Allah has a reason. And it's not said that Allah has a reason. Now, it might not have occurred to you that saying that Allah has a reason, or maybe it might have. Or what might have occurred to you that he's saying, he's just talking mentally, like it's just the idea of it is what he's saying here. Two things that weigh the same, how could one of them become heavier for no reason? So, okay, but anyway, just I want to draw your attention to that Shaykh doesn't approve of his wording here. Even if for you might say it doesn't seem to be the worst thing in the world that he said. Allah Ta'ala is not a reason. A reason is a creation that leads to a creation. Allah is the creator of reasons. Reasons lead to results. Results are definitely creations. What about reasons? Reasons are creations too. So then Allah is not a reason. He is the creator of reasons and the creator of results. So then what he should have said, according to the Shaykh, What he should have said, according to the Shaykh, or what would have been better, is that he should have said bila murajjih, without a preponderator, without a preponderator. Two things that weigh the same. How would one of them become heavier without a preponderator? So now let's get back here. وهو الفاعل المختار جل وعلا. And this preponderator, he is the doer, the choosing doer. That means he doesn't create by nature. He creates by will. He does what he wills. He creates by choice, and he makes something exist if he wills or not. And he doesn't change. Jalla wa ala, great and exalted. وهذا معنى قولهم. This is what they mean when they say لازم أن يكون أحد الأمرين المتساويين مساويا لذاته راجحا لذاته. This is what they mean when they say that this would dictate that two things that weigh the same by themselves, two things that intrinsically are equal, they weigh the same, that one of them would be heavier than the other one by itself. Two things by themselves weigh the same, and then one of them is heavier by itself. وَهُوَ مُحَالٌ ضَرُورَةً. This is impossible intuitively, by necessity. هذا إن قلنا إن الوجود والعدم بالنسبة إلى الممكن متساويان. And this, all of this, is if we say that existence and non-existence in relation to a possibility are equal. And this is the chosen saying. أما إن قلنا العدم أولى به من الوجود لقبوله إياه بلا سبب فهو أصل في كل حادث فأظهر في الاحتياج إلى الصانع. But if we were to say that non-existence is most fundamental for an event because it is its origin, it will be non-existent for no reason. If we say non-existence is most fundamental for a possibility because it would be non-existent for no reason, so that's the origin for every event, فَأَظْهَرُ فِي الْإِحْتِيَاجِ إِلَى الصَّانِعِ, then this actually strengthens the argument that the event needs a maker, although that's not the stronger saying. So that's very interesting. That's, for me, is one of the interesting mas'ala in Tawheed. A case that's not the stronger saying, but if you wanted to go by it, it makes your argument stronger. And then you might say, wow, that sounds really strong though. How is not the stronger saying? For sure, if an event, an event for sure, which means it's created, is a possibility. So existence is possible for it and non-existence is possible for it. Yes. Now, we were just taking all this time to argue that they weigh the same. Existence and non-existence weigh the same for this possibility. Now you're saying that actually there are some scholars who said, no, they don't weigh the same. Non-existence is heavier, actually, because it's going to be non-existent for no reason. So you might say, wow, what? How's that not the stronger saying? Isn't that true? So the answer goes back to what we already said, something we already said, which is that if it did exist, your mind still says it didn't have to. Whenever it did come into existence, your mind still judges that it didn't have to. It didn't have to come into existence at all, and it didn't have to come into existence at that time. Could have been earlier or later. So no matter what time it existed, it still could have existed earlier or later or not at all. And therefore, existence and non-existence are equal. That's the stronger saying. And the analogy for it is a door being opened or closed. So which one is more likely for the door? Neither. Being opened and being closed are equal. They weigh the same pertaining to the door. If one of them occurred, then it was for a preponderator outside of the door itself. لئلا يلزم ترجيح الوجود المرجوح على العدم الراجح بلا مرجح. According to this second saying, then this it strengthens the argument because the the side of existence is weaker, is lighter, and the side of non-existence is heavier. So then this thing, how could it happen by itself? How could the side of existence become heavier than the side of non-existence when it was lighter? So there's two sayings, and either existence and non-existence weigh the same, or non-existence is heavier. Either way, existence can't become heavier by itself. Had we taken the weaker saying that non-existence is heavier, then even more so then that more so strengthens the argument that it couldn't have happened by itself. Yes, the term weight has nothing to do with pounds or kilos here. It's just an analogy. Yani, our analogy here is that of a scale. So it has two pans. So if the scale works properly, we should be starting out with two pans that are equal. Can't have a scale that's already broken. فقد ظهر استحالة إيجاد العالم نفسه. And so the impossibility of the world creating itself has become apparent or obvious. بل هو مفتقر إلى غيره في تخصيصه بالوجود دون العدم. Rather, it requires something other than itself to particularize it with existence over non-existence. المساوي له أو الراجح عليه. To particularize it with existence over non-existence that's equal to that existence according to a saying, or non-existence that's heavier than that existence according to the other saying. وفي تخصيصه بالمكان المخصوص دون سائر الأمكنة, and to specify it, particularize it with a particular place over all other places. وفي تخصيصه بالزمان المخصوص دون سائر الأزمنة, and to particularize it with a particular time over another time. وفي تخصيصه بالمقدار المخصوص دون سائر المقادير, and to particularize it with a particular measure over other measures. وفي تخصيصه بالصفة المخصوصة دون سائر الصفات, and to particularize it with a particular attribute over other attributes. فهذه الأشياء كلها متساوية. All of these things are equal. That's another thing that shows you that the preponderant saying is that the existence and non-existence are equal for possibility, which is look at its qualities. Cold or warm, which one should be more likely? It's neither one. I'm talking about outside factors. Yani, the outside thing is what's going to make it preponderant. But by itself, neither one is. Should be up or down, what? Should be boy or girl, or what? So then existence and non-existence, strong saying is that for a possibility, they are equal. But according to the weaker saying that non-existence is more fundamental, that only strengthens the argument. فاختصاصها وترجحها على مقابلها يدل على أن المرجح غيرها. And so, a possibilities being particularized, and for the weightiness of one of the two sides to appear over It's opposite. This proves that the preponderator is other than the event itself. وَهُوَ اللَّهُ ta'ala, and that is God, exalted is He. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Allah knows best.